Welcome to Executives at the Edge, a podcast brought to you by MEF. I'm your host, Pascal Menezes. Join me as we explore thought-provoking perspectives from the leaders and changemakers who are propelling enterprise digital transformation forward. Well, I'm really super delighted to have Siân Morgan, Research Director at Dell'Oro. Siân, welcome to Executives at the Edge. And today I believe we're going to cover some really fascinating topics around campus NaaS and why it's so important and how digital transformational use cases play an important role to having a very stable network inside the buildings and campuses. So Siân, welcome to Executives at the Edge. And for our listeners, can you just give a background about yourself and Dell'Oro? That would be appreciated.
Yes, of course. So thank you, Pascal, for having me. I'm kind of excited to be on your podcast. I love to listen to it, so it's fun to be here. So I work for Dell'Oro Group. We're a quantitative market research firm. Many of your listeners will know us already. We're based in Silicon Valley, and we set the standard in terms of telecoms and IT market data and information. So we provide in-depth and objective research to support executive decision-making. And I've been with Dell'Oro almost 2 years now. But prior to that, I have a service provider background in technology strategy. But now I'm responsible for enterprise class wireless LAN research at Dell'Oro Group. So I'm tracking all sorts of fascinating trends such as AI ops and unlicensed access to 6 gigahertz, of course, introduction of Wi-Fi 7. And last year, I released a report on public cloud managed LAN and campus NaaS. And because of the interest, I also released a second version a month ago.
So I think today's episode will be around campus NaaS, and that's Campus Network as a Service. So why Campus Network as a Service? What is it and why?
Yeah, it's a really confusing market. I know that MEF has mentioned this before, how, it's confusing and there's a variability in how people are defining the different terms. It can mean so many different things. Most people, when they hear the term NaaS, they think of wide area networking, like transport routing, or as a cloud-inspired service. But there's a whole new dimension of NaaS out there now that's NaaS for campus LAN services. So one similarity that campus NaaS has to NaaS is that it's inspired by the cloud model, which, as we know, involves some kind of technology abstraction, like elasticity and automation. But many of the characteristics of a cloud computing model are based on an implementation in which infrastructure is centralized and shared. And of course, in the campus, there are laws of physics, which we just can't avoid, right? So cables have maximum lengths and RF signals have propagation characteristics. And so there's a lot of the technology that needs to be on-site and dedicated to the customer. And so this means that vendors, when they're delivering their campus NaaS offers, they're coming up with different creative ways to deliver LAN services in a cloud-inspired model. So they're not all taking the same approach, but they're innovating in different ways.
So I think this is driven really by software-defined networking and to some extent even virtualization and certainly orchestration. So what we're just saying is campus NaaS is the ability for an enterprise to say, Mr. Provider, that's coming from a cloud-centric point of view and model, managing my campus or branches not only for Wi-Fi, which we've seen that service for a long time, but also manage it for my private 5G deployments and manage it for my LAN switches. And it's all done from the cloud. All the policies are driven from the cloud. It's all automated, run from the cloud. And basically, it's kind of a modern way of a managed kind of model in the old world into a more modern network as a service from a cloud delivery model. Is that correct?
I think that, yeah, there is definitely an aspect, and I think you're touching on exactly the right point, which is how is this different from the managed services, the managed LAN services that we had before? So we've identified 3 key characteristics of the campus NaaS offers today, and not all of them exhibit all 3, but they largely cut across many of the offers. So the first one is that the hardware costs are charged in a recurring price model. So instead of this big upfront purchase of equipment, it involves recurring charges, which implies some kind of behind the scenes financing for the equipment. The second is, and this is one of the things to your point, which is very important, is that at least some of the network lifecycle services are delivered by the vendor or the MSP. And these are bundled with the recurring charges as well. So here I'm speaking of network lifecycle services and not like 24/7 TAC or equipment support, but really network lifecycle. And then the third characteristic of many of the offers on the market are that they're priced in an outcome basis. So this implies like some level of technology abstraction. So instead of purchasing like a Node B or a Wi-Fi AP or a switch port, enterprises could purchase a number of devices that are supported or coverage across a specific area. And so purchasing a LAN on an outcome basis is effectively transferring the risk of delivering the quality of service to the vendor. So those are I'd say the three characteristics that, are inspired and they involve in the implementation, as you said, like a lot of software defined, a lot of cloud, a lot of automation. But this, from a service perspective, those three characteristics cut across many of the offers of campus NaaS that we're seeing on the market today.
Yeah, and we think of network as a service generally as a commercial model that's either usage or subscription based, but they don't really own the capital. It's all done by the provider. And the good news is that it's also now building in, some kind of cybersecurity posture like zero trust. So I think a lot of the campus NaaS solutions being offered has a zero trust principle, which is really like somewhat of a basic old network access controls, NAC, but with much more sophisticated policies and so on, and credentials and so on. So is that how you think about it? As also as it's a new commercial model, and now it builds in some level of cybersecurity, at least for a zero trust principle. Is that kind of your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that it's really interesting what you said about, like, I get this question all the time. Is it a technology or is it a commercial model? And the answer is it's both, right? Different, there's been innovations in the technology, but there's also like a new construct or new commercial model that we see. So I would definitely agree with that. And I would also say that it really lends itself well to bundling all of an enterprise's needs into a package, into a recurring price. And so what you said about zero trust, about NAC, but it could be other services as well, like application layer services, or, all of that could be bundled in, basically to make the enterprise IT department their lives easier, allow them to focus on more strategic objectives. I treat IT as a utility, really.
So is this more catered to like small and medium enterprises? Or do you see the multinationals really wanting this? Or it's hard to understand what's the market for this?
Yes, it's a really good question. And part of the reason that question is complicated is that there's not a single definition of what campus NaaS is. And so what we've seen on the market is they're really grouped around three different types of service. And each of those types of service are targeted at different types of enterprises. So the first service we call Enabler Campus NaaS, which is really designed to make it easier or less costly for an MSP to wrap its lifecycle services around vendor hardware in a CNaaS construct. So this allows MSPs to reach maybe further down market, at the lower end of the mid-market, to reach a larger volume of enterprises, and really has the potential to grow the outsourcing of lifecycle services. There's another type of campus NaaS, which we're calling turnkey campus NaaS. So these are bespoke offers targeted at very large corporations that bundle a complex suite of IT needs into a scope of work. So that's targeting a different segment. And then there's a third group that we call LAN as a utility campus NaaS. This service is really an outcome-based service. Vendors are innovating on a technology level as much as they can to integrate automation into the network management. And this service is really suited to be an underlay to innovative applications that they could layer on top. So it could be like, you could think of retail services like e-labeling services, or occupancy monitoring in a carpeted office environment. So services like that could be layered on top of a LAN as a utility service. And so that segment is going to tend to be better suited to the mid-market with more standard floor plans, and also smaller IT departments. So it's that sweet spot between having complex IT needs, but not really having a full IT department to deliver, the quality they need.
So you mentioned that. I think there's a lot with digital transformation happening. I think there are a lot of opportunities for campus now, especially, where you need to have deterministic outcomes like private 5G will deliver. Like if you're talking about industrial or manufacturing or robots or smart warehouses, they need to have very deterministic, and they don't want to be tethered to wired. So, and Wi-Fi, even the Wi-Fi 7 has a lot of great qualities to it. I think private 5G still guarantees a deterministic outcome of, that connectivity needs. So I think, and especially with slicing involved too. So I think this combination of digital transformation needing much more from networks, and then, applying AI, inference at the edges, or, all these IoT or robotic things. And then also coupled with that ability to then layer that from, whether it be wired at, for management levels of like, finance, administration, or manufacturing, and then also Wi-Fi. And I think Wi-Fi 7 is, from 6E going to 7 to 6 gigahertz opens up another spectrum. And I think all of that just being managed spectrum-wise, for private 5G, CBRS is, I think, very popular. And how do you manage that correctly? So I think all of that management of spectrum and connectivity, and then all the overlay applications have to run right. I think, isn't that kind of like the opportunity why this is becoming the trend right now? I mean, why now?
Yes, you touched on some really great themes. I couldn't agree more, actually. Your point about digital transformation projects is so important. And emphasize what you just said. Many enterprises, their revenues depend on the fact that their networks are performing correctly. Like no network, no revenue. So this is not like a nice to have, right? So if with something so important, it's going to definitely move them towards like a more turnkey or CNaaS, campus NaaS service. And I would also agree that what I call multi-access networks, but is what you just spoke about, like a private cellular Wi-Fi combination, it's a really good use case for a CNaaS construct. Partly because it's a high capex involvement, like private cellular is not cheap. So anything that has a high capex, obviously, a recurring price structure looks more, looks especially interesting. Secondly, it's very complex to manage, right? So trying to manage a 3GPP network as well as an IEEE network at the same time with the same team is really not easy. So that management complexity also lends itself very well to a campus NaaS construct, in addition to what you said about the high performance requirements and the criticity of having a deterministic network.
So what do you think is the CNaaS market? What is the overall IT market for CNaaS globally? I don't know if you have that information. And what do you think are the likely players to win here? We know Now is a big player. That's John Chambers' startup. Cisco's an incumbent that's been doing this for years, selling, all kinds of Wi-Fi solutions and switches into the enterprise. Same with Aruba, now HPE, Aruba HPE, I don't know what they're calling it. So there are many extreme. How do you see this all playing out?
Yeah. So yes, we do size the market. So that's in the report that I published. I would say just to anchor maybe how we think about this, and I like. This goes to something you mentioned earlier about it being automated and public cloud managed. So campus NaaS is really a subset of the public cloud managed market because it needs to be automated, because it needs to be centralized. So, and to give you an idea, the public cloud managed LAN market was about 20% of LAN revenues in 2023. So like a decent segment. And this segment is going to grow faster than the market. So we're projecting that by 2028, the public cloud managed LAN market will hit $12.5 billion in manufacturer revenues. So that just covers wireless LAN and switching managed by the public cloud. So campus NaaS is going to be a subset of that. At first, it's going to be a small subset. So by 2028, we're projecting about 8% of that. But we do expect to see some very interesting growth and of all three types. So of the turnkey, of the enabler, and of the LAN as utility. And each will have like different trends and evolve probably in different ways going forward.
So MEF has created, the network as a service NaaS blueprint, which is a baseline for everybody to snap to for automation, for services, for certifications. And we're doing all some kind of innovative stuff. However, we think of NaaS as the cloud side connecting with service providers and then offering it to enterprises. And demarcation point would be what we call the user to network interface, which we stop at the site. But now with campus NaaS being, basically provided as a service by providers, whether it be OTTs or, traditional service providers, communication service providers, that demarcation point of the uni moves now further to the device, application, or user. So now it's a truly end-to-end model where a device, user, application is that demarcation point stops there, and that whole experience to the destination, which are mainly clouds, is fully end-to-end managed and delivered a high-quality outcome. Is that, it's very challenging to stitch all of these pieces together. How do you see that?
Yes, I do. I see that's exactly right. So definitely campus NaaS is reaching into the local area network, right? Reaching right into the enterprise. And the value they can bring is sort of guaranteeing a level of service or improving the performance all the way down to the enterprise. I think there's a lot of opportunity for integration for providers that today are offering NaaS in the wide area network or in multi-cloud networking into the campus. We haven't seen a lot of that yet, but it's definitely a trend that I'm watching, and it could change the market because it seems to me that those two services are similar and could really add a lot of benefit to an enterprise.
So what do you think is likely going to change over the next 5 years? What's your prediction?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's going to grow for the reasons I just said before. As we see public cloud managed LAN growing, we're going to see campus NaaS growing along with it. So we've got some nice growth potential there. I think we're going to see different levels of convergence. So we're going to see some vertical convergence. So basically a convergence of the LAN, of the network layer, and some applications that lay on top of that. So I mentioned some before, like retail specialized applications, for instance, or logistics specialized applications. Because as soon as you turn LAN into a utility, it's so much easier to pile interesting applications or vertical specific applications over there. So I think we'll see more integration on that side. You mentioned Nile. There's several other smaller players like Meter, Join Digital. Raman is one that does, multi-access private cellular. I think that what we'll see on the side of those new entrants is they're going to be focusing over the next little while on gaining scale. So they've been focusing over the past few years on honing their technology, understanding what the market wants, fine-tuning their business model. But now they're there and they want scale. So I would expect to see more partnerships there, both domestically, internationally, maybe some acquisitions, but those companies are going to be really looking to grow. I also think that there's an opportunity for some horizontal convergence. We spoke about that before, but some of those players who are offering today NaaS in the wide area or in multi-cloud networking could choose to reach into the LAN and begin offering campus NaaS as well. So that's going to be an interesting development to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. So didn't I see it? I think AWS offering a private 5G kind of bundling now into the enterprise. So that's kind of almost into a kind of campus NaaS kind of environment, don't you think?
Yes, it's definitely a campus environment. That's right, exactly. And that's a really interesting, like as we see private cellular take off more and more, that kind of offer is going to look even more interesting. And to combine that with a wireless LAN offer, because every company who needs private cellular also needs wireless LAN. But to be able to combine that into an offer that's easy to consume with both of the technologies is a very interesting opportunity.
And now I think, with AI coming in so prevalent, this use case of having the campus environment running right in connectivity to then handle these kind of digital transformational use cases, inference from the edge that needs, milliseconds for robots, that runs a neural network or a transformer architecture for generative AI. I think those all become very, very important, critically important. I was talking to, I won't name the company that's very predominant in delivering chipsets for AI, GPU, you can infer from there. But basically, they were talking about how the environment is video analytics, as an example, just the ability to have, a single chip of a GPU, a DPU, and a CPU, so that all pipeline together, in a single or 3 chips in one little UCB box that the provider owns or the campus NaaS provider owns, then can load in these kind of applications of AI. For example, the video analytics is very cool that, can detect just from that little edge box, any, from the cameras, any kinds of weird outcomes that needs to be kind of analyzed, not by humans, by AI inference machines. So I think there are so many use cases that can be layered now on top of the campus NaaS that was probably not there before. It was mainly just admin and engineering and maybe voice over IP and video for what we're doing, video conference calls. But now it's going to be very, very game changer with digital transformation coming in so rapidly. So Sean, any last words? And again, this has been very insightful.
Yeah, no, I would just agree with what you said, and the other thing about the AI additions to this service is that it makes it all the more important to have a connection to the cloud, management from the cloud, and then that choice about where you want to run those workloads. Right? Is it in the cloud? Is it on the edge? Is it at the device? And so it really adds to the complexity, but adds to the opportunity also of campus NaaS. So I totally agree with that.
Well, Sean, it's been really delightful talking to you, and thank you for joining us at Executives at the Edge, and we look forward to more of these episodes with you.
Thank you, Pascal. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for Executives at the Edge. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe today, share online a review. Find all our episodes on your favorite podcast platform and at MEF.net.